Sun up, sun down. I know now. You are the one. I know now.
Okay, today we're going to take a look at all 5 of the Fuji crons, from the 16 all the way up to the 90 mil in the f2 range. When I was buying these lenses and trying to decide what to get, there's a lot of reviews on the individual ones, but I didn't find a lot of videos that actually took all of these lenses, paired them up to each other to show how they really feel and talk about what they're like using in the real world. And I'm also going to talk a little bit about some of my favorites for different situations. But let's jump in and look at all of these Fuji crons, their different focal lengths, and how they feel in both a portrait scene and more of a landscape type scene. When people think of the Fuji cron lenses, I think they think of the Trinity, and we have all 3 of those here today. I have the 50 on here. I have, what is this, the 35 in my hand. I also have the 23. One of the really cool things about the Fuji system is that you can get these really nice quality prime lenses that are f2 and they're really compact. It's actually why I switched my crop sensor cameras from Sony to Fuji. I just love the ergonomics, the way they feel, the way they shoot, and all the cool lenses that you can get for a fairly reasonable price from an optical perspective and still getting really good quality. I actually still use the Sony as my full frame system. The new 16 millimeter, which is actually a 2.8, so we can still call that an f2, and also the 90 millimeter, which is actually what I'm shooting with right now on the XT3. And I love the 90 because whether you're doing a wider shot like this or a close-up portrait, that f2 at the 90, just the depth of field, the creaminess of the bokeh, it's probably my favorite portrait lens. We're going to look at all of these today, and rather than pixel peep and look at quality, we might do that another day and actually compare these image quality wise to some Sony lenses and things like that. We're going to look at the focal lengths, both on like a more of a landscape setting as well as a portrait setting on all 5 of these Fuji crons. Now, don't beat me up if you think that only the trio is like the Fuji cron, like Canon, right? To me, all that f2 lineup that is primes and kind of in that f2 range is the Fuji crons, all the compacts. The 90 is not super compact, but for a 90 millimeter f2, it is pretty compact. I'm not trying to define exactly what the Fuji crons are for you. To me, my Fuji crons are the 60 millimeter 2.8, the 23 millimeter f2, the 35 millimeter f2, the 50 f2, and the 90 f2. Let's look at the perspectives, the focal lengths, and the differences in the same scenes of every one of these 5 lenses. This is a 16 mil, about a 24 millimeter equivalent. Now, some landscape photographers will differ. I do a lot of landscape photography, and 24 millimeter is my all-time favorite focal length for landscapes. 23 on the Fuji and about 35 on a full frame equivalent. But it is a really versatile lens, and it's a good looking lens. It's a light lens, and it just is very functional. This is the 23. 35 millimeter, again at f2.8, a really great street lens. A lot of people love a 35, which is a 50 equivalent on a full frame for its street abilities. And it's just really versatile. It's long enough that you can shoot portraits with this. It's not a long portrait lens though. I mean, traditionally a 35 is a bit wide for portraits. 50 is actually a really versatile lens. Love the bokeh on it. And of course, on a full frame camera, this would be right about an 80 mil. This is the 90 millimeter at f2.8.
Sun up, sun down. I know now. You are the one. I know.
We'll run these at f2 for some portrait tests down here by the river. And we have Sandra here, and we're just going to run through the different... Hello.
Hi.
Are you doing anything later? Okay, so we're gonna run through, starting with the 90. I'm gonna run these ones at f2 for portraits. They're phenomenal, wide open. Okay, this is the 90 millimeter at f2. Let's switch over to the 50. Continuing at f2 here, and this is the 50 millimeter at f2. And makes a lot of difference. The 50 is a very versatile lens. It can be used on the street, it can be used for portraits, but in this case, I would want to move closer for this portrait, throw that background a little more out of focus. And again, the 50 would be about a 80 millimeter equivalent on a 35. The 35, again, running at f2, and Another really versatile lens. If you could only choose one, maybe it would be the 35 or the 50. And you can do portraits when you get close. We'll examine that a little bit. And you can also use this just as a versatile lens. It's the equivalent of more or less a 50 millimeter at 35. The 23 millimeter here on the Fuji, the 35 millimeter equivalent. Of course, now we're getting really wide, unless you were going for an actual wide angle look. This is typically not what you'd use in a portrait scene. The 23 could be a versatile walk around though, because it's wide enough to use for quite a few like landscape and pictorial, as well as street situations. 16, this is the new wide angle, the 24 millimeter equivalent. One of my favorite focal lengths for landscape, but not necessarily for street, and certainly too wide for most portrait scenarios. Here's what we're gonna do now. I'm gonna throw up on the screen here, Sondra, the same relative size in the frame with each of these lenses using my foot zoom, which is a powerful tool, but it's important to remember that we can move closer or further away. We can change how big a subject is in the frame, and the perspective and all that kind of stuff is very powerful. But that doesn't change the focal length. So even if the subject's filling the frame, we're still dealing with compression, distortion, all these things. So here are all 5 lenses with her in a portrait type position, the same relative framing, and you can see how much difference that makes in just the bokeh, the compression, the feel of the entire portrait. And so while typically you use a longer lens for the portraits, doesn't always have to be the case. You can use the wider lenses to get a different feel. They just need to be matched to the visualization that you're trying to achieve. With primes, you do tend to get a faster, more robust lens, and oftentimes you can get a quality lens for less money. Of course, you can spend a great deal of money on primes. One of the reasons I love the Fuji primes is I really feel like I'm getting professional image quality, not kit lens image quality, not mediocre. I'm not compromising on the quality, but I still have these fast, compact lenses that are really versatile. Of course, you can step up to the full, big, herky primes like the 90 millimeter, 135, f1.4s, things like that, and get gorgeous results, but you're switching more into a heavy lens that's as heavy now as a zoom lens. But with a lot of our zoom lenses maxing out at 2.8, or oftentimes even with pro zoom lenses, even at f4, the prime lens does give us more depth of field and oftentimes a better bokeh than we would get on an equivalent zoom lens that might actually cost quite a bit more. Okay, everybody, hope you found that useful. If you like these videos, if you want to see more, hit that like button, and better yet, subscribe. If you didn't like it, well, dislike it and tell me what you're thinking. Regardless of the sensor crop, also bear in mind that your compression, your distortion, your depth of field, that follows the focal length, not the sensor size. So if you have a 90 millimeter f2 on a crop sensor and a 90 millimeter f2 on a full frame, it's going to look different because of the crop. You're going to have more space, but your depth of field, your overall aesthetic of the lens is actually going to be very similar. So hope you guys enjoyed. Let me know in the comments what lenses you think are the best focal length for each situation.